Good morning from the Rooster Inn. We had a good coverage of the planets earlier this morning, exposing or imaging, I should say, Uranus, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and a newish moon. This is the Sun, and that's, of course, our dogs. There are a couple of sunspots, one right about 6 o'clock, and the ones at 11 o'clock have been marching on us for quite a few days. I'm surprised they've shot north. They used to be much further south in the sun, if there is north and south in the sun. At the very edge, in terms of prominences or solar flares, there's just a tiny one at 10 o'clock, and I can't see anything else. Even increasing exposure dramatically. There are a couple on top at 12 o'clock. Yeah, it's a fairly quiet disk today. So I've been playing with the exposure. Nah. So we go back to auto on blue and adjust the red accordingly. For the most part, all the exposure here works well, although I'd like it to be just a touch brighter. Oh, let's see if it'll let me adjust brightness separately. Not really, not much. Okay, so this is our 5 minutes of the sun this morning. I'm gonna go out to the garden. It's beautiful, beautiful outside. It's time to cut down some more trees and open up the world to Stellina and to the telescopes. So here's the sun again. Good morning and welcome for joining me at the Rooster Inn Observatory. The disk has a couple of areas of sunspots today. There are those just above 6 o'clock and right around 11 o'clock. Those two right on top, they used to be closer to here yesterday, and I'm surprised that they're moving up at an angle. Given that the sun rotates once around its axis once every 25, 26 days, I'm used to seeing sunspots move in a circular manner or just traverse horizontally. But these two have shot up at an angle since yesterday. I cannot explain it. And as we look at the edge of the sun for solar flares, not much to write home about today. There is a tiny one at 10 o'clock and not much else. It's a quiet day on the sun today. Let me see if increasing exposure is going to show us much else. Obviously, there are some tiny ones at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 11ish, 10 o'clock. Nothing prominent about these prominences, just tiny solar flares shooting out of the side of the sun. Back to the surface to look at the sunspots. I'm going to adjust the hydrogen alpha tuner to see if we can see anything else. Well, this is it here. And the focus. Nope, this is the best we're gonna get. Trying to see if there is any filament on the surface. There is one tiny filament up here. Filaments are essentially solar flares seen face on as opposed to from the edge of the sun. Here there is one filament up there. Most astrophotographers, most astronomers who view the sun use monochrome cameras, and they observe the disk as a gray disk, and then they try to do the colorization afterwards with Photoshop or some similar software. I am using a color camera to try to reproduce as faithfully as possible what the sun is showing. The hydrogen alpha filter is just that. It is a very narrow band filter that passes wavelengths, optical wavelengths in the hydrogen alpha band, and that is why we are able to see the prominences, the solar flares. A neutral density filter that just attenuates the overall light will show sunspots, but would not show solar flares. And the character of the surface of the sun, indicative of its activity, would not be visible with the neutral density filter, but rather with the hydrogen alpha filter, which is what we're looking at. I'm gonna grab a quick capture of 1,000 frames and then stack them. It's going to save them as a AVI file. These are my 1,000 frames. The next thing is to open Auto Staggered. And find out where we stored the capture. And there is the file that we just captured. It's 1,000 frames. And we're going to start by analyzing it. That analysis will tell us how many of the frames are of high quality. Oh, it's not liking it at all. It does not like, for some reason, at all the quality of the graph. Alright, we'll still stack 25% of the frames. And let's see what that gives us. I'm surprised with the analysis, the quality analysis that it scored these images so low. Okay, stacking complete. And this is what stacked image looks like. Come in. That is the stacked image of 1,000 frames of 250 frames, 25% of 1,000 frames. Not too bad. It's showing the main sunspot, the two sunspots on top, and if we look at the enhanced image, it's not pretty at all. So we're going to stick with the unenhanced image. And if we need to do any editing, I can do that later on. Okay. So we're going to take a quick look at the sun. And go back to the edge, to the disk. Yep, nothing new. So I'm going to leave you with this. I'll come back and check on it in a few minutes. In the meantime, at my chainsaw wood chipper ready, and keep working on the Eastern Front, where nature is trying to take away from me my horizon. Prior to spring, I could see as low as 1.5 degree elevation altitude. So I would see things literally as soon as they rise within a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. Now in the summer, I've lost about 3 degrees, so rising objects need about a good half hour after they rise before they clear the treetops. And even though the telescopes did not come with a filter that sees through trees, Lowe's had a filter that sees through trees, actually a filter that takes out trees. It's called the Ryobi 14-inch chainsaw, which is going to be my tool for most of the morning. We live in a Bortle 4 area, southeast of Syracuse, New York, where the skies get dark and the house sits on an old apple orchard with extremely old, diseased and falling apart trees. So quite a bit of good firewood, old apple hardwood. We also have a few very tall ash trees that fight their way by shooting straight up into the sky and then fall over. So they're going to be the target of my project on this glorious day. Temperature outside is 56 degrees. Fortunately, that's Fahrenheit. And sunny, clear blue skies. The main excitement of tonight, if the weather permits, is the great red spot of Jupiter will be facing us, and imaging the great red spot has eluded me so far. So I will have 2 telescopes waiting for the wee hours of the morning. According to Stellarium, I have a narrow window between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, 3:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. in which the big red spot will be facing us, and the sun will not be high enough yet, but Jupiter will be high enough, so that it's a critical half hour. And so I'll be trying to image that. The other interesting thing is that Venus will be about 2.5 degrees away from the moon, which means Venus will be visible all day tomorrow, if you know where to look for it, namely right next to the moon. It'll be a new moon, young moon, and all day tomorrow, looking up into the blue sky, if it's blue, we should be able to see the moon and Venus right next to it. I will attempt to do some daytime imaging of the moon and Venus tomorrow. Given that they will be about 2.5 degrees apart, none of the telescopes have this field of view, but my Canon camera with a 250mm lens will have that field of view, and it should serve that purpose. So I want to wish you a good morning from the Rooster Inn Observatory, and see you bright and early tomorrow morning for Jupiter's great red spot, and then later in the morning for conjunction of Venus and the Moon. So long.